We got rehearsal in a few minutes.
Okay. You have the scripts and stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Give me a few minutes and then I'll meet you.
Gotcha.
I tell people, people are like, so you really can't hear anything? And I'm like, no, nothing. Without hearing aids, it's like, there's nothing. I can't hear my heart beating. I can't hear myself breathing. When I talk, I only feel my throat moving. I know it's vibrating, but it's not, I don't know how loud or soft it is. I just know that it's moving. And so it's a weird sensation, but it is peaceful. I only hear the mid to low range pitches. And so if you maybe say had a bar graph and that bar graph was up to 100, like a normal human, my bar graph would be to about 76% on my left ear, which is 3/4 of the way up, essentially. And then my right ear would be almost all the way up, but not quite, at 86%. And if you would put that graph as the bottom being low and the higher being high, that high part is missing. I don't hear that high part. And so say if you were playing a piano and you would touch every note on a piano, I wouldn't be able to hear the last 10 or so notes because those are out of the range that I can hear. I can hear all of these. And then it kind of starts to get faint right about here. I think this is something. And then there's nothing. I just hear the clack, clack, clack of the key. There's nothing. Might as well be dead keys to me.
She was diagnosed with high-frequency hearing loss. It's sensory neural hearing loss. She was diagnosed at 3 years old. We did not get a diagnosis on her until her brother was born here in Baton Rouge. And then a pediatrician that we brought James to overheard Grace talking to me. I remember him asking, do y'all have a history of hearing loss in your family at all? I said, no, sir, we don't. He said, I'm a little concerned about her tone, the way she sounds. And then I told him, well, we are going through some testing with James right now. He said, I think it would be great if we could go ahead and get her in the booth today and do a quick little hearing test just to see. And as the audiologist was blasting sound through the speakers, Grace's voice never changed. And she was saying, Mom, is it time to go yet? Meanwhile, I'm doing like this because it's so loud and she couldn't hear it.
Once we diagnosed her, we were really taken back, and so many of the puzzle pieces started coming together. So many of the, we'll call it Grace-isms, came together. For the longest time, she would ask my wife, she would say Bobby, right? She would call my wife Bobby instead of Mommy, just because she read lips, and she couldn't hear the M, the M sound. She would say, Mommy, why does Daddy tell you alligator food? She couldn't understand what that was. Like, she could read about alligators, and she knew that an alligator was an animal, but why did Daddy tell you alligator food? Well, after months of us trying to figure this out and chuckling about it, one day I went to leave to go to work, and I hugged my wife. She was holding Grace, and I gave her a kiss, and I told her I love you. See? Same lip movement. So she couldn't put I love you together. But from her books, she knew that an alligator's an animal and they must eat. Dad's telling Mom alligator food.
I didn't really look at it as a big deal at the time. My perspective was, people have so many problems and so many deficits. This is hearing. We're going to do what we need to do, give them all the tools to be successful, and that's kind of just the attitude we've always had from the very beginning. I have seen many children with other disabilities that I would think would be devastating, and still we see them continue on and continue to do their best, and I figured, based on that, there's no reason why my two children can't be successful as well.
Failing my hearing test, like having to go in knowing I'm gonna fail it, ever since I used to hate it when I was little, because I was a perfectionist in school. I wanted like A's and stuff like that, and so knowing, like going into a hearing appointment or a speech therapy session, knowing that I was gonna fail before even walking into the door, you know? Because, I mean, nobody wants to fail. And nobody wants to be reminded if there's something that they can't do, you can't do it over and over and over again. This is the cochlear implant. Well, this isn't the implant, but this is the device that goes with the implant. So what happens whenever I hear with this is that this is basically a prosthetic ear in the way that sound goes through these little bitty microphones right here, and it goes through the coil into the magnet. And in my head, it's like right under my scalp, there's a magnet that's this shape, and it's a gel, like a clear gel, and it's got a little magnetic ball on the top of it, which is hence the magnet, and it has a string that goes from this into my cochlea in my ear, which is the little swirly part of your ear, and it sends pulses into those to make the hairs inside my cochlea move, because what's wrong with mine is that, you know, in a normal person, the hairs in the cochlea, they move like this when sound happens, when you hear something. But when I was younger, when I had little hearing, they would just kind of just maybe move, maybe not, in some ranges. And so that cochlear implant makes it move and like kind of forces me to hear.
It's frustrating sometimes because like I don't know if she has her hearing aids in most of the time. Like, hey, great, and I was like, hey, and all that crazy stuff. But it doesn't really matter. I think it's really cool for both of us to, like, we both have it, so it just makes us kind of grow our relationship again, because we're probably only the 2 deaf kids in our school, so we're like, oh, we can kind of form a bond and make that bond bigger.
Well, eventually we ended up at a performing arts theater school where it was musical theater productions and dance numbers with tap, jazz, ballet, hip hop, you name it. A very comprehensive program, and she absolutely loved it. I can't imagine the challenges presented there. One, learning in the studio where the instructor is not even facing towards you. You have to listen with the instructor facing the mirror. I'm sure that has to be pretty hard to learn the dances, but then also hearing the music when performing. When sound comes through speakers, it's usually really hard for her to catch what's going on or to really clearly hear what's coming through the speakers.
The first time I realized that, like, oh, this may be something that holds me back was when it's something that people may not be so keen to accept, was when I was in a musical theater, I was in class, and someone had come in, and one of my hearing aids had gone out. It was late at night, and I was about 9 years old. We were tap dancing, and tap dancing music is usually show tunes, and there are no bass sounds, and so I was really going off of my instructor's hand motions, her lips, and what everybody else was doing. And the person who had come in was kind of not impressed, and she was saying like, oh, y'all aren't even with the music. And I said, well, in my defense, it makes sense that I'm not with the music because my hearing aids weren't even on. But she was like, oh, well, you should be able to feel it. And I was like, wow. I was angry at that. Like, it was kind of the first, like, whoa. And it hit me hard as a kid. You kind of been sheltered when you're young. You don't want people to hurt you. Your parents don't want people to hurt you, and so they kind of keep it from you. But in that moment, it was just there, all thrown at me. And I kept it in, until I went home. But when I got home, I was just so angry that somebody could think like that, even though they knew me. They know how I work. I realized people really don't know what it's like to live like I live.
I'd say her toughest moment that she was able to verbalize to us was her moment of being able to identify with someone or something.
And we were talking about how people see her. And this is the first time I'd ever heard her talk about what others perceive her to be. And that's big for a teenager to really start to think about that. And for the first time I went, should I not have done the invasive surgery that we did? that allows her to hear like everybody else. What if I should have let her be a part of the deaf community where signing was their way of communicating? Because she continued to express that I'm trying to figure out where I identify. Who do I identify with? So much emphasis in today's society is put on what group are you a part of? And she was finding that there was no identity there. So that's the first time that it's ever been, I sure hope we made the right decision for her. On stage, that is where she feels the best. One thing led to another, and she's growing up in high school and figures out that she may need to take a break from musical theater. It took lots of time. She was on the elite dance company there at the studio, so it took a lot of time away from academics, and that's ultimately her first love. She loves to learn new things, and so she stopped doing that, but then found a new niche, which is pageantry. And so she ended up being in her first pageant and ended up placing first runner-up, but then was in her first festival pageant and won queen, which it was a wonderful experience for her because she got to meet some fabulous people. But then she said, I wonder if I could do this at the state level. So she ended up competing in our state pageant and ended up placing in the top 5 and got the Congeniality Award.
And I was honestly surprised at how accepting people were whenever I would talk to them about, you know, what I needed. For example, the MC, his name was Tim, Mr. Tim. He was, the first day you walk in, everybody's kind of nervous. Everybody's wearing a nice outfit because this is the first time that you meet the people of the organization. And I told Mr. Tim, I said, you know, I'm hearing impaired, so whenever you're on stage, I'm not going to be able to hear you. So if you need me to do anything, just look at me, possibly, and do a gesture, or we can make a little handshake, we can do something. When I was competing, he would make sure that I knew where I was going to go. Whenever he announced my name for, you know, top 10, top 5, he would look at me, and that was just awesome, because I kind of knew, it was kind of like knowing before everybody else knew. That brief moment, he would look at me and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I just made top 10, what?
Diversity is what makes her tick. She thinks that because we're all different, that's what makes life happen. And that's what she loves. Now, she is a part of the Very Special Miss Louisiana pageant where she serves as ambassador. So she is currently speaking for those who cannot speak for themselves at times, promoting this organization in an effort to raise money for special needs children.
Grace, they picked a perfect name for her. That's all I can say is her mom really and dad picked a wonderful name for her, Grace. She has such grace and poise. She is intelligent, she's sweet. Not only is she beautiful on the outside, her inner body is just beautiful. She speaks with such intelligence. She makes you feel like you're important, and everybody wants her to be important because of the disability that she has. And to look at her, you'd never know she had a disability. I just believe that her mom and dad made her strive to be everything she could be. And that's what parents seem to do with children with disabilities. They want them to be more, they make them try even harder. They want their children to try and strive even harder than what they would if they didn't have a disability. And Grace she has proven everybody wrong, that being deaf is not going to hold her back.
And when I first got the title, I was actually kind of distraught because it's a special needs pageant, and I love working with people with special needs and working for their advancement. But at the same time, I kind of had an existential crisis. You know, I was like, well, my problem was that I didn't want people, when they first saw me, to say, oh, she's got something weird about it. And that was kind of the first time that I really struggled with it, because with pageants, I was exposed to many different kinds of people that I wasn't normally exposed to. And so it really had me thinking. But then as I thought more, it became something that this opportunity would be to change that first impression of, oh, she's got something different about her because she's wearing a sash that says Very Special Miss. It's a special needs pageant. My role is to help change that perception that isn't necessarily accurate. I want to show people that a disability doesn't mean that there's an inability to love or to connect on that deep level that everybody else connects on. Like, it's, people think with a disability or just a difference, I guess, it sets you apart. It gives you an incapacity to feel, almost. It's like, I don't know, you kind of see it in people's faces whenever you introduce yourself and they hear you sound different or they see that you have hearing aids on. It's a wall that's put up, and I kind of want to break down that wall, or maybe not have a wall in the first place.